Welcome, everybody. On behalf of the Board of Directors of the Arab American Community and Cultural Center, I welcome you all to this first of a series of events celebrating the National Arab American Heritage Month. We welcome all of you. And for those of you who are from out of town, I'd like to tell you that the ACC is the only organization that serves the local Arab American community, regardless of nationality, ethnicity, religion, or gender. We have a mission to serve the Arab American community here in Houston, as well as foster a greater understanding of Arab heritage in Houston. And accordingly, we jumped at the opportunity to work with Fotofest and their ongoing Biennial, highlighting contemporary Arab art from the Middle East and North Africa. I'd like to welcome Fred Baldwin and Wendy Watrous, the Fotofest co-founders, for being here with us tonight. I want to thank them for bringing an unprecedented look at Arab art from the Middle East, and truly a view from the inside, so thank you. I'd like to thank Karin von Roques, the curator and our Arab art scholar here. And many thanks go to Zoe Goldman for working with us and helping us put this together. You've been so professional, and it's been a pleasure working with you, Zoe. Thank you. I'd like to also introduce you to the Fotofest exhibiting artists who are in the audience, and Mr. George Fikri Ibrahim. We're thrilled to have you with us today. And Mr. Ahmed Jadallah, where are you? There you go. The only photojournalist exhibiting at Fotofest. Before I start, I would like to thank our sponsorship, Mr. Nijad and Mrs. Zainab Harris, Dr. Raymond Sawaya, Dr. Hassan Rida, Mrs. Dania Dandashli, Mr. Ali Daher, Mr. Wadi Al-Haj, Mr. Fadi Dimasi, our President Abdel Adam Khadiri, Mr. Muhammad Boughaba, Dr. Ali Al-Himyari, Dr. Nidan Muqaddam, Mrs. Dania Dandashli, and did I forget anyone? I think I got you all. Thank you all for your sponsorship. This event would not have been possible without you. I want to introduce for you right now the roundtable participants that we have. We are thrilled to have you. And I'll start with Mrs. Sama Al-Shaibi. Sama is Iraqi born, and her father is Iraqi, but her mother is Palestinian. And she is a professor, an associate professor at the University of Arizona. She negotiates space in her artwork, and she also explores the interaction of people competing for resources and power. She also, her artwork reflects the exploration of the aftermath of war and exile. And
have everyone seen anyone not do this without reading it?
Oh. Well, I'm not done with Sama yet. Sama has had more than 10 solo exhibits, and she has also exhibited in group exhibits, the last one being the 2012 Venice Biennale. 13, Venice Biennale. You made me forget the rest. By the way, make sure you don't ask Sama just gender-specific questions. Next to Sama is Khalid Hafiz from Egypt. Khalid gave up a practice in medicine to become an artist. And his work involves multimedia, video, painting, of course, photography. And he is a Fulbright Fellow. And let me see what I can remember. He had more than 21 solo exhibits, right? And he has exhibited in the Contemporary Art Museum in Denmark, as well as the Johnson Museum of Modern Art in New York, the Saatchi Gallery in London. And our moderator, Dr. Walid Gaber, is an associate professor at Baylor College of Medicine, and he is one of the treasures that has been recently added to the board of directors of the ACC. We're putting him to test today. Next to him is Steve Sibella. Steve is born in Jerusalem, currently resides in Berlin. Steve has a master's degrees in photographic arts from the University of Westminster in distinction, right? And a master's in art business from Sotheby's Arts Institute in London. He put shape and form to the emotions and the psychic experience of exile. And he was recently awarded in 2008 the Ellen Auerbach Award by the Akademie der Kunst in Berlin. We are happy to have you here, Steve. And last but not least, Stephen Stapleton. He's a London-based artist, curator, and co-founder of Edge of Arabia. Edge of Arabia is an important platform and an arts initiative that attempts to bring awareness and promote art from the Middle East and North Africa. You can tell him how that idea came to him with two Saudi artists that are also Fotofest exhibiting artists, if I understand it correctly, in Asir in Saudi Arabia. And by the way, don't forget to ask Khalid Hafiz about his Big Mac theory on the Egyptian identity. So I'll let Walid take over.
Thank you. So thank you, Dina. You are absolutely right. I mean, she is incredible in doing this. I mean, I'm very impressed. It always impresses me. So I would like to have a warm, easygoing discussion. I will, after each of the panelists would have time to address the issue, I would look to the audience. If you have a question that is pertinent to this specific topic, I will take a question. If you have a general question, I would ask you to refrain until the end, when we could open it up at the end to general discussion. All I'm asking for, just sit back, open your eyes. You can't close your eyes in this. These are visual artists. Open your eyes and just let them listen to them. And it's a great privilege for us to have such renowned artists visiting us in Houston. Let's listen to them and see what they have to teach us about art, the Middle East, the Arab world, the West, and everything that they know of. I would like to start with, when I was putting this presentation together, I went alphabetically, which turned out to be great because this way Sama is first. Because I was so worried if Sama is not first, I would be told off because of gender issues. So, you know, it turned out to be lucky. So I would like to go through some of the artworks that they have exhibited and ask each one of them to tell us about the artwork, about who they are, and introduce themselves to us. So, Umayma, if you would go back to the beginning, that would be great. Oh, she's there? Okay.
Maybe there's some people who would like to come
Okay,
sit in
go ahead.
from the audience into the seats back there. There's some extra seats still up. We'll give them a moment.
And can we turn the lights off for a minute?
There's still 4 seats here and several in the audience.
Nabeen, can you turn off the light? Yeah.
Is it too dark?
Yeah, only for this part, just so that the artwork would be more. Oh, just go ahead.
But he's going to...
Yeah. No, you go ahead.
Oh, you want me to speak about myself or my work?
Your work, yourself.
Okay, first of all, good evening, everybody, and thank you so much for having me back in Houston. I was here a couple of years ago,
with the Palestine Film Festival at Rice University speaking. Such an honor to be back, and I haven't really had the opportunity to say publicly a big, great thanks to Wendy and Fred for bringing this all together. I was sitting in my room today and noted that this was the first time in a decade of exhibiting my work internationally that I've had my dear friends and colleagues come to the United States. Well, I'm sure they've shown in the United States, but for me to be showing alongside them in the United States when we've had so many exhibitions together in Europe and the Middle East. So it's a tremendous opportunity to be in my now adopted country, United States, with my colleagues and friends. So I graduated from University of Colorado Boulder in 2004. I started being an artist. I would say that I understood that I was an artist sometime during undergraduate school when I went to be a war photographer and study under the great legend John H. White, who was a Pulitzer Prize-winning photojournalist. And that's where my beginnings were, because I grew up in the Iraq-Iran War, and then I was displaced to many different countries one after another as a Palestinian Iraqi. I had a very big problem, our family had a big problem finding permanent residency in a country that would take us. Eventually, we came to the United States, and I lived here for a number of years and was able to go to school when I became a green card holder and got some student aid to be able to go to school. And I found out when I was documenting, I was trying to make documentary photography in my photojournalist class, but speak to my interests about war and conflict. And I didn't really know any wars that were going on in Chicago except for gangs, which was not my work. So I put myself in the photograph and drew all over my body and the walls, and my professors were pulling their hair out and said, "Sama, this is photojournalism, you can't put yourself in the picture." So I stayed in my classes and I continued my work, and my professor said, "I think you're an artist. You're not a photojournalist, but keep doing your work." I decided to go to graduate school the day of September 11th when all of these images started to come to TV. And I started doing my first projects, which included my body. But my body was not representing myself as Sama al-Shaibi, but the countries that I was speaking to and the issues. In this one, it's Say Nothing, and it comes from the work that is showing here now in Houston at the Fotofest Biennial, which deals, I think, with the only probably body of work where I'm specifically dealing with gender, and it's the issues of conflating war with democracy. Conflating democracy with giving women their rights in Iraq. Women always enjoyed their rights in Iraq, and it was a way we sold the war in the United States, a very unpopular war that was turning out not how the Bush government had hoped. And I looked at the issues of the landscape, the lives of women in Iraq and how they deteriorated, and as well as the physical landscape, how it changed and shifting. And I used the great legacy of Iraq, its wonderful contributions to mankind, and juxtapose that inscription of violence and its celebration of its wonderful history together with my body. Thank you.
I think you're going to have to hold the applause, maybe a long night.
Yeah.
So, well, those are really my parents. And my father was a doctor in the Egyptian army, and my mother is a cardiologist. They're both retired, both alive. And my mother was into the army twice, and she left the army colonel and retired as a professor of cardiology. Both influenced my being an artist because they never believed in what I did. And but this is serious. I mean, they forced me to study medicine, but I worship them because what happened actually is my brother, who's right there, he's a banker, so he kept the family name, and because they forced me to study medicine, I kept the name of my grandfather. Hence, his name is Omar Dunya, my name is Khaled Hafiz. Initially, I started painting at the age of 5 years old, and when I'm asked about who am I now, if I'm asked to identify myself as an artist, I say I'm a painter and filmmaker. I use video as a tool of expression but I hate to call myself video artist. Sometimes actually I disdain video art. I'm more into a filmmaker. I like to write narrative. I like to tell stories. And as I grew from my childhood to adulthood, I mean, I guess part of my life was spent in a dark room watching film. Today, my practice spans the mediums of painting, photography, video, and installation art. In my work, I explore the notion of what it is, I mean the notions of identity in general, at large, but according to each medium, like in my painting, I try to explore the notion what it is to be Egyptian, because I think the identity, the Egyptian identity is quite complex. While in my video and in my film work, I explore notions of identity in terms of what it is to be an Arab or a Middle Eastern, with features like mine in a post-September 11 world. Like I said in my talk a few days ago, the whole thing started when each time I cross a border, I'm being practically the only person who has to pass through a random check. So the idea is usually it's either me or me and the Chinese, but always I have to pass the random check. The random check is always, it happens. It's the way I look, not what passport I carry. And this actually, since the beginning, it never bothered me. And I always looked at it, I took it lightly. And later, it drove me to explore, to delve into that actually, and start to explore in my video what actually led to this random check. I believe that what led to that is simply the modern political history of the Arab world that started in Egypt with the history of revolutions in the mid-50s and exportation of independence. I think it's reminiscent to today's exportation of democracy that happens from certain hegemons towards certain parts of the world. And then I will pass to my friend Steve Zobelle.
Hi, I just wanted to say about the image before. I'm investigating why images look better than reality. I have no idea. It's definitely a construct, and I have no idea where they got it from. Anyway, I come from Jerusalem's old city. Actually, I was born in the old city, and early on I was investigating the invisible world we live in. Except that my mission got interrupted because I grew up under Israeli occupation. So it took me almost 37 years to defy that occupation and get rid of it once and for all. The physical occupation is given, but what bothered me was how Israelis, or the system itself, managed to colonize my imagination. So I see my process, I saw my work, how to free myself, how to free my imagination from every residue of the occupation. So what I needed to do is something horrific. I needed to uproot myself completely from where I came from. Not because I'm embarrassed to come from Jerusalem or to come from Palestine. It's exactly the opposite. I'm so proud where I come from. But I needed to live free. And to live free, I needed to let go of the system completely and create a new system that's only true to myself and to my mind and to my imagination. Ironically, I had to do this through art. Thank you. Bless you. I had to do this through art, and then once I freed myself, I found myself imprisoned by my own art. As you can see, I do collage, so I try to recreate the world through collage. And over the years, art helped me free myself, and then art itself became my occupier. So I needed to let go of art completely so that I can live free again. So I'm happy I have done it. And yeah, you can see this is, but this was done in London. Those were my exile years. And I thought I'll be there forever, for eternity. It turned out there is another way of looking at life. So I had to change my perception and my consciousness. Thank you.
Have I got any slides? Oh, there I do have slides. They've prepared these for me. I'm British Norwegian. I'm obviously the odd one out. But my story really connects with the idea of artists and the connections that artists are able to make beyond the borders and the the sort of polarization that happened as we grew up between the Western world and the Middle East. And my father was in the Royal Air Force. You know, he was Wing Commander Eric Julian Stapleton, and I remember going to him when I was about 13 and saying, you know, I don't think I really want to join the Royal Air Force. And he was like, well, it's a good idea, because there's like shrinking army and stuff. But he kind of encouraged me, and I took this creative path. And I started to become really interested, perhaps because as the son in a military family, you move every 2 years and you have a kind of nomadic life. I started to naturally fall into this category of a kind of travel artist. I was always in a new place. And I started to look into the history of travel artists, particularly in the 19th century, and the idea of an artist explorer, and artists that go to places and come back with information and ideas. And I really felt that in the media age, when you had this very powerful story being told about the rest of the world through the media, that this idea of the artist, the lone artist out in the world, had lost all its power, but that they should have a place, because of that subjective view, that human contact, that small story, actually provided a very important alternative to the way that the media was creating this narrative around the world. So in 2000, in fact it was 1999, I decided to go to the Middle East before 9/11 as an artist, and we spent 3 years preparing for a trip, and I found myself in 2002 leaving England in a Toyota Hilux truck that we called Yasmin. We drove down through Eastern Europe, across Turkey, crossed over into Iran, Dogha Bayazit, and ended up spending a year as artists on the road in the Middle East during the build-up to the war in Iraq, which in retrospect sort of has its own story, but at the time we didn't know how that story was going to unfold. And as British artists, I think we understand images, and we started to deconstruct this story that was being told through images in the media. And being in Tehran in Christmas 2002, you were watching both sides at the same time. And as artists, we were connecting with artists. That was our way into the society. And artists have a funny way of kind of opening their sketchbook or opening their camera and connecting very quickly across a divide that other people perhaps can't. It's a sort of magic code that artists can have. I ended up crossing from Yemen to Saudi in March 2003, literally as the invasion of Iraq happened in those couple of days. And that's when my artistic career sort of began to disappear, and my career to support a group of artists that I met there started to take shape, because I felt that here was a group of artists who really were at the center of a story, and yet nobody knew about that voice. When I say the center of a story, I'm talking about the artists practicing at the center of the Islamic world at a time when that center of the Islamic world had influenced a huge geopolitical economic shift. And these artists were marginalized not only within their own society, but within their own street because of the nature of Saudi Arabia. So my story begins like this as an artist, and I've championed those artists for better or worse, because now I miss my own practice as an artist. But something extraordinary has happened, is that those artists have developed and risen to the challenge of the opportunities that our organization have given them. They've developed an incredible soft power, I think, in their own society, and they've opened up a lot of channels between, especially Saudi Arabia and the rest of the world.
Maybe the art project is your masterpiece.
Well, actually, this is a very interesting prelude to where I would like to take this conversation. We have an associate professor of art. We have an artist who is sponsoring younger artists. We have an artist who is prolific in writing articles, which are very interesting. I ask you all to go and read Steve's articles. One of them, and Stephen, of course, who is supporting artists. So I want to start with Steve's article, Valued in the West, Sold in the East. And I want to ask you all, and start with Steve, so how is your work, or how do you think art is influenced by collectors, by galleries? You know, we all know that in the 19th century, all the French galleries, were very influential in the Impressionist movement and so on. But we have a peculiar thing on top of the ordinary question, that is, as you said in the article, made in the East, valued in the West. What's your opinion on this? Stephen, of course, must have a lot to say about that. So I'll start with Steve, and then, just join in and...
Well, it's a huge topic. I mean, I don't know how much I can tackle from that, but the thing is, galleries are gatekeepers of the art world. This should be their perception in life, and unfortunately, many of them are not. Not even in Europe or America, and definitely not many in the Middle East are gatekeepers. They tend to treat artists like art logos, and some artists, I see them as brands. Like, let's say in Europe, I see them as brands, so this means the gallery needs sometimes to adjust to the brand. Where in the Middle East, galleries treat artists like logos, they adjust them, they change them, they form them, and they don't realize that artists need to change, oh wow, the light.
Let there be light.
Yeah, let there be light. Now, I'm being very critical about that, but don't think this is like the scene itself is all like that. I'm just saying, because I experience galleries in many countries, I think there should be synergy between the gallery and the artist. Both need to have the same vision. Now, artists do this fatal mistake. They go for galleries that they don't appreciate their work, and they just go for the name of the gallery, rather than finding a gallery that is interested in their work. And the same thing with galleries. They tend to find names to work with because they want to work with this artist or that artist, rather than looking at the art itself and trying to understand the artist's journey. Okay? Do you agree on this? At least? Yeah. So, I think galleries and collectors, even collectors, I have a problem with many collectors. I only have, with all my respect to many people who buy my work, many collectors, they say, I bought Steve Sibella. I bought Khaled Hafiz. No, I'm not for sale. It's my art is for sale. I'm sorry. So you can't buy Khaled Hafiz. Yeah. So I always stop people and say, I bought you. No, you didn't buy me. You bought a work of art of mine, and I'm happy you enjoy it, and you like it. And then you find collectors buying the work of many artists, and they have no idea what collecting is about. And if you spoke about history, I mean, collecting is a passion. You collect with your eyes, not with your pocket. Buy something you like. I never bought art in my life because I never had money. But last week, I'm so proud to say, I bought the first artwork in my life. Why? It arrested me. And hardly anything satisfies my eyes. And when I saw this artwork, I said, whoa, dude. Then I asked how much. He said, it's $1,500. I said, I take it. Even though I can spare the $1,500, I didn't give a damn because I really liked the work. I mean, we can continue. What's the artist? It's on the cover or you're making out?
So I guess I'm trying to get to the point of the fact that you are Arab artists, and that we are one. So then you want to get into this discussion. That was one of the questions we've had. Would you consider yourself an artist from the Arab world or an Arab artist, or is there any such thing as an Arab artist? And I will let Steve answer this.
Oh, yeah. Am I an Arab artist? That's a very good question. I have perfect red hair, white. No, I'll go back to, I was with an artist called Faisal Samra, a Saudi artist in Jeddah, and we were at this conference at this ladies' university called Darul Hekman. He made this statement, and it was really powerful, and it was about how the market and the light that's shone on which artists are important kind of takes advantage of free attention. And this is a very cynical way to look at it. But after 9/11 and after maybe the rise of some forces and the fall of some forces in the world, a light was shone on the Middle East, the same way that a light was shone on China after Tiananmen Square or on Russia after certain things. And the market and the galleries and the energy took advantage because it's free advertising in a way. It's fashion in a strange kind of way. It's a nasty way to look at it. But I think his statement was correct that after that, the Middle East took some years, but became a kind of this idea of an Arab artist and Arab artwork became part of a brand that took advantage of this free attention. And I think it's important for artists to recognize that in their own journey. Maybe I'm a good example, a British artist that gave up my practice in a way because there's no light. I'm the generation below Damien Hirst. They killed it for us. There's no way for me to compete with that energy, which was the last energy in the art world, the thing. I'm not sure if that answers your question, but there is just one other point I want to make, which is the idea of art as a status symbol and art as a commodity. I think these are very two important things for artists to be aware of in the Middle East. Art is definitely a status symbol, Middle Eastern art, within a class of very wealthy people, and it's not a bad thing. It's always been a status symbol, but it's important to be aware. The artist is aware where their artwork ends up, and the collector is also aware of how they're using it. You know, is it a status symbol or is it a point of discussion for the idea behind the artwork? And I've seen that because when we started, nobody was interested in these artists from Saudi Arabia. Now it's the hottest thing in the art market, and it's definitely become a kind of status symbol, and of course a commodity, an investment commodity in these things. And it's not a bad or good thing. It's just, let's be aware of what it is and why.
I guess, I mean, to turn the question around before I come to my left side, I mean, would you think that a person from the Arab world is more likely to see what you're getting at, more so than any other person? Or is this irrelevant? Art is art, it's beyond that, there is the visual aspect. I don't know if Sama wants to answer.
You go ahead.
No, please.
I don't understand the question.
I mean, so we're back to the point of, would you consider yourself an Arab artist? Is there an Arab art? Are you an artist irrespective of that ethnic? What's your views of the ethnicity of art? Could we say?
I don't know if the chicken came before the egg or the egg came before the chicken or whatever, something like that. They say. But I mean, for me, I know my mother was a painter, and I know that all my life as a child, she took us to museums and we painted in the house and we listened to Mozart, and she cultivated the creative imaginations with everything small. She loved nature, but I also know I was displaced and dislocated, and my mother's Palestinian, and I was brought up around the kitchen table hearing of stories of loss. And then I experienced war as a small child, and I saw my friends pass away, and I was uprooted. And so when people tell me if the collectors made the market, or if we have 10 years or 15 or 20 years until it's finished, I want to tell them to go shove it, because this is who I am, and I know every artist has a real reason for being there that I show with, and it's something that's around us and we keep having to deal with, talking about whether we would be important or not. We don't know in the end. I think Steve Sibella's work is incredible, and I think he would have made it despite the scene being there or not. To what level, I'm not sure. I'm a professor. I have to teach students and groom them in a time where there are a university teaching art in every state in the United States, and I have to help them find a way to know that they're contributing and they're being listened to, and to sustain that practice, and to know it's important, and to find satisfaction for their soul as artists, but not to ignore the fact that there is a status and there is a commodity there, and that you're intersecting it, and you don't want to lose your faith in your work or have it be changed by those who are trying to impress upon you. It's a very complicated conversation, but I am proud to be Arab. I know that being Arab influenced my work. I find several interesting visual connections between myself and many other Arab artists, even though I studied in the West and I didn't know their works before I made my works. So I find that's interesting, that there might be a vernacular there. And in the same time, I know we always said we are speaking to an individual voice within us that has nothing to do with being from where we're from, that it is something that, you know, is a calling in life that you cultivate through what's around us and what is innate.
Would you like to add something?
Yeah, I'd like to build on what my friend said, but I'll speak about my own personal experience, actually. I was twice, actually, on debates in 2 different occasions. One of them was in not Art Basel, but Scope Basel, which is one of the satellite fairs very close to Art Basel. And then one time, I think it was during the Sharjah Biennial in 2007, as early as 2007, when Walid's question came up, is there something called Arab artist or African artist or like any artist affiliated to geographic distribution. I think coming from Egypt, where I am, there is a generation of artists who actually managed to do the weaning from their own professors very early. And those people refrain this category of artists, those young artists, I'm saying young, they're now like 35 to 40, I'm 50. Those artists, they categorically refuse the label of any label that is put before the word artist. They believe that art is universal, etc. Personally, I don't have any allergy of being labeled as an Arab artist at all. And I don't have any allergy of being labeled as African artist or Mediterranean artist or Middle East artist. I have moved, or international artist at that, like just artist, it works as well. I have moved with those in between brackets labels. I exhibited in Africa, in Dakar and in Mali. I was prized and I moved as an African artist. I was never prized from an Arab body, but yet whether I like it or not, I'm Arab and I enjoy it. Actually, being Egyptian, because Egyptian it means Arab, Middle Eastern, Mediterranean, African, ancient Egyptian, Judeo-Christian, Arabo-Islamic, it's all that. It's cumulative. Personally, my generation, I don't think anybody has the allergy of being described as anything, as long as I'm part of exhibitions that are meaningful. Like I do remember when Karin Adrian von Roques in 2007 came up with the idea of the past out of the present out of the past millennia. At the Kunstmuseum Bonn, she invited 15 artists. One of them, very young, the youngest, refused categorically to be part because he said that I don't want to be, I think he told Karin that this exhibition will damage my career or something like that. He was 21 then. Karin was generous enough to invite an artist who was 21 who tells her this exhibition will damage my career because they're only Egyptian artists. I think, of course, this artist, I think, is delusion because he is mentored and trained by certain people who actually proposed to him this proposal that art is universal. But on the other hand, I accepted to be in Karin's show because Karin's show was curated. It's not a bus of Egyptian artists or a bus of Arab artists or a bus of African artists because this in itself is not enough to do an exhibition at all. Yeah, so actually I accept to be labeled as anything, as artist or as anything else, as long as the exhibition is meaningful and it is curated and it has a meaning and the works talk to each other and there is a subject and etc., etc., etc. So I don't have this allergy at all. I want to talk more,
No, I just want to say something small. It's not being embarrassed about being artist from the Arab world or being an Arab artist or Palestinian artist. I'm just asking myself, why are we debating here among where the audience is mostly from the Arab world? Why are we debating Arab art? Why we have an identity crisis? Why can't we speak about art? Why do we need always to speak about the identity of where we come from? I mean, I notice it's happening from Morocco to Kuwait. And well, all I'm saying, it's us who are putting ourselves always in a circle, in a loop. We need to break this circle and become independent thinkers and just artists. Yeah.
I agree with what Steve said exactly, and that's the hope for the future, and I think we have to make that reality now, too. But in the same time, I had a wonderful dinner at Rodena's house last night, and her brother made a very incredible point. He said, because I was like, we're not stars, we're just human beings. And he said, you are our stars because there are so many people out in the Arab world who are embarrassing us and saying this is not who we are, and we're not, people misunderstand us around the world. And so sometimes there is something about having this incredible, positive, complicated, diverse approach to the world to show this variety and our intelligence and intellect and our history and our future and our, there's a reason sometimes we want this, people around us want to claim the Arabness of us, and I understand that too.
Again, you want to say something?
Everyone's had two goes apart from me, so I want to have two goes. No, I want to say this. It relates to a later question, I think, but I'm going to blow it now. But about the idea of history of art, and the idea that yes, there is this light, and I can see it. There's enormous attention on your region, and you have endlessly people putting the mic in front of your voice, which is an amazing privilege. And I totally agree that it shouldn't be wasted on endless conversations about who we are. Like, it'll pass. It will pass, just like it passed from Paris to New York to the YBAs, wherever it goes, to the whatever scene and stuff. But like to use it and use your chance to tell your story, what you care about, whether it be an injustice or whether it be a connection. We've all got our personal things that we believe in, but I think I'm endlessly at these Middle East art conferences. Either it's too academic and it talks about art about art, or it talks always about what is Arab identity. And I think it's a missed opportunity to tell the stories and the ideas, the intellectual ideas, the stories, which are really what I think it needs to come out, because these are the alternative stories to that big story, which is incredibly negative.
So go ahead. Go ahead.
He gave me a microphone that doesn't work. Well, what I wanted to say before actually builds on what Stephen and Sama said, actually. In order to, that's exactly what Stephen said is what I'm mentoring the young artists who come to my studio, that they should not stop at all at labels. Labels are not at all bothering, and they're not important, and they're not important. They're not life-threatening, and they're not to stop in front. And if you are confronted one day by something like that, tackle it. What I'm doing with my younger peers is killing them with management skills in order to manage their own careers, with skills that allows them to be heard and read on the international level as much as the local level. Develop their own verbatim and their own words according to their own voice dimension. I'm working with them one-to-one, actually, to work only on their strong points at my studio, with the objective that one day, when they exhibit on the international scene, they are capable of telling their own stories and not stop in front of minor labels or other.
So I think that's a very interesting conclusion of this. But let me take it one step further, and I agree with Stephen and with Steve, with all what has been said, that we need to move beyond this. But I have a personal feeling that this is a new thing. I have a personal feeling, which is my own opinion, is that there's a new era of Arab art. That art has somehow seen a very bad period, I don't know, hundreds of years or whatever, and now there is a renaissance in Arab art. Maybe it's still picking up momentum. What's your thoughts of this? Is this a new era? Are we entering a new era of art? Is this sustainable? Is maybe, as Stephen and some of you have alluded to, just because the world got interested in us curiously after 9/11? Or is our society moving? Do you feel it as an artist that there is a lot to be said? This is something new that is happening? And whoever wants to start, I will,
Can I start?
Yes.
Okay. I'll speak about the case of Egypt, and I'll do it in exactly 60 seconds. And I think that our revolution started 15 years ago in the arts in Egypt. And I think in Lebanon, it started probably at the same time or 1 year earlier. Egypt and Lebanon are a very particular case. This revolution it started with music, theater, writing. I work now with a publisher who started with young Egyptian writers, especially female writers, in the 90s. All of them are translated now to several languages. So I think the revolution in culture started 15 years ago in Egypt.
Let's just be clear. I think artists, they always created art, not 10 years and not 20 and not 50, not 100 and not 500 years ago. Artists from our region, they were always doing art. Now recently, we are noticing them more. The question is why? And that has to do because in the Gulf, they started to build their artistic credentials. They just started to build a massive infrastructure for validating art. It starts actually with the political system being stable. And then when the political system is stable, then you develop the infrastructure from streets to economy. And then when the economy gets better, then you start to say, what shall we invest in? Or what shall we empower? And then you start to build galleries kick in, collectors, universities, auction houses, art fairs, and it goes on and on. Now, I think definitely there was a revolution in the last 10, 15 years in the Gulf, but it was triggered by thirst for an art market. Now, well, this is okay because artists cannot live without selling their art. And this is actually an artist's curse. I have to survive on my art. And this, in many ways, contaminates my artistic process if I let go of my dignity, if I let go of things I believe in. Unfortunately, many artists have gone the bad way, and unfortunately, galleries have helped them create art to suit collectors' walls, and so on. Now, I think there is a new revolution now happening. There is an army of people from the Arab world, organically now it's happening, that are studying art history, curating, all art disciplines in all over the world. And these people now going to lead this revolution and change its direction, change its course. I think they're going to be influential, and they're gaining a lot of power. It's only a question of time where we're going to see a radical shift.
Sama wanted to say
something. Well, I can talk. I think something in Saudi Arabia is a very good case study for this, because I think that there has been a genuine awakening in a really positive way. And I don't think it did start with the market in Saudi Arabia when I first went. I think that there was a need, like an urgent need, for the younger generation to re-establish their own identity, and it went into Islamic culture. They understood that they were at the center of the Islamic world, and that the way that artists were exploring their world from the past generation was totally out of sync with suddenly all these changes. The internet transformed everything in Saudi Arabia, because it was such a huge shift between not having access to information and not knowing your context in the world to suddenly all this new information. What's interesting in Saudi is that the artists they've had this international exposure, but then they've come back into themselves. So the artists who are now working in Mecca, they're really putting a mirror up to their own society, and they're re-exploring even the Quran. You know, they're going into the stories of the Quran and re-exploring these and say, what do these actually mean? It wasn't what the Imam told us in the mosque again and again and again. This is something that we're allowed to look at creatively, which is a very powerful thing if you think how modern Islam has spread around the world. So I think in Saudi there is a genuine awakening, and it's very local, and it's very real.
I was going to let you go on with the question, but I guess I will address it a little bit. I kind of heard it differently, because I just thought we were talking about art in general, not necessarily from the Arab world. I do want to say quickly that I lived in Saudi Arabia in 2nd, 3rd, 4th grade, and Riyadh, actually, and I'm about 40, so you can place that time. I am exactly 40. I'm not afraid to say it. Like, he's 50, and we're both parents. Okay. Well, I'm not going to say your age, but you're a parent. I don't know. Everyone's trying to be the 40 under 40. I don't know. It used to be 30 under 30. Now it's whatever.
It's all about our age tonight.
Yes. And I think I had a really hard time making certain kinds of work, because when I was growing up in Riyadh, when I think I sketch, and so every time I was listening in class, I would be sketching, and I got in a lot of trouble because I was doing drawings, and they made me always put a line on the neck or block things out, and it took me a really long time to go out in public in the world with my work, because I was so afraid. And then I realized all these people were doing far more interesting and pushing the boundaries of work than I was doing when I was in my early 20s. So it's quite exciting to see the young Saudis and what they're pushing with their work, and that's really comforting. Not to be challenging Islam, but what it means to be a Muslim and what it means to have a creative voice. And I would say, from as an American professor and academic that goes to conferences here quite regularly and engaged in this dialogue, and I was on the board of directors of SPE, Society for Photography Education, for the past 4 years. and we have Chewy here in the audience who's there now. We have this real challenge ahead of us because there is, I think, a war against art right now in America, and it has been going for a long time, but it's really happening now. And we even have Obama up there saying that our futures of these humanities degrees don't matter anymore, and that we have to train everybody for these sort of, job positions, and that's the kind of work. And as if the humanities, I mean, he targeted art history as being the issue. This president that we all sort of love and hate. It's targeting the humanities, and that's a real problem. And I have a bunch of students who want to study photography and they want to study art, but they want to be in the creative economy of like graphic design and this and that, and make money that looks cool and surfboards, and you have to keep pushing them to understand that art is part of a much larger dialogue of history, of geography, of geopolitics, of science. It belongs in a university setting. So I hope that it's going through a sort of coming back into this wave. It's being important. But I think even though I use social media and I'm the media professor, but I have to find all kinds of ways to intersect that art making, relevant life, and its history. Otherwise, it is problematic.
So, I just have one last question for you guys, and then we'll see what everybody would like to ask you. And that is, which is a follow-up on this and a final one. So it seems like art goes through different periods of art for art's sake, where artists are so into themselves, and then art gets thrown into the social world, like it is happening in the Arab world now, where artists feel that they have to make big statements to free themselves and society. So what's your thoughts on this? Is this, as an artist, what do you feel? Is this, does art have a social message, or to heck with it, I'm an artist, I just express myself, and they just have to follow me?
I can say it very briefly. Sorry, I'm a bit jittery because I'm been not sleeping for many weeks, and I've been flying east, west. I crossed half the planet twice this week. What was the question? No, okay, now I remember. No, it's very simple. I think speaking about oneself. Sorry, they want coffee now. 1 second. Yeah. I would say it very simply. Speaking about oneself is about speaking about others. Now, when I do my own art, I'm not thinking of Palestine. I'm not thinking of Palestinians. I'm not thinking of the Arab world. I'm creating out of a need because I need to express myself. Now, it's up to the spectator, to the art historian, to the curator, to see whatever she or he wants to see in my work. I am okay 100% with that. It's not up to me to colonize the meaning of my work. Okay? Now, once an artwork is created, it has a life of its own. There is things happening on this table. It's an artwork, once it's created, it has a life of its own, devoid from the life of the artist. Now, it's subject to study, it's subject to criticism, it's subject to many interpretations. So it's totally okay that they can relate it to movements, to relate it to geography. This is all fine. There is no problem with that. It's just sometimes how we keep looping ourselves in these categories and without moving on. But I'm telling you something, I think it's only a question of time till artists themselves also will find their own personal freedom, and they will start to defy the system from within to reach a point where we're gonna, and I think it's already happening. Look how many solo shows artists from the Arab world are having all over the world. It's a shocking number. If you don't know, I'm telling you, go research. I think artists from the Arab world have more solos in this world, more than any other country in the world. So, seriously, I don't. How we managed to do that is beyond me. So it is happening. You're witnessing change, and this is a great moment in history.
Yeah, I would say that there's a history meets art history moment now for whatever you want to call it, Arab art. In my case, I believe that the beginning of the 21st century, art history is being written. And art history is not fair. Art history is not written by, some democratic group of people around the world. Cézanne became famous because somebody wrote a book and created the myth of the mad artist who chopped off his ear. It's not really true. But I think that actually probably at the late 20th century was dominated by the US, and especially New York, with a lot of powerful critics, and they created all these movements. It was pop art and abstract expressionism. And I think there's a real chance, and writers and and people involved should be excited in the Arab world to get a chapter in 21st century art history, where history and huge forces in geopolitical, economic, cultural forces met with a group of voices who don't necessarily have to be political, but they are part of a number of themes and a number of movements. And I think that that's where it's really important that alongside the artists, there are great writers, there are great contextualizers, great projects, because then when this passes, there will be an alternative story to the one told by the media from this moment in history. And I think that that's an exciting, I mean, I'm British, but I'm excited to be part of a moment where history meets art history, because it doesn't happen very often, and it's very powerful, I think. Yeah.
A little confusing there. Agree with both of what you said, and just to add to it, as the one person of color in the visual art program in the School of Art at University of Arizona, top 10 photography program in the country, I always felt it was my personal responsibility, not because somebody gave it to me, because it's who I am, to decenter the Western pole of the canon, and not have it always just about the Middle East, but South African artists, and I'll just say looking at the world globally and looking at what the different artists are doing and interesting intersections of their work. For me, one of the things that we had on the questions that we might be presented with today is that, why did you become an artist? And I have this question all the time when I'm speaking in groups that are not with Arab origins, as many of you are. Is this art, or is this social practice or activism, or and I would always say no would be asking this question if I was white and male. It seems when you're white and male, whatever you make, and you're an artist, that's art, right? And then if I make it, it's like, well, it's because the politics of the Middle East. And that was my issue about the gender thing. It wasn't that my work doesn't reflect gender, issues of gender. It's that I just want to speak with an equal voice with anybody else that's speaking. And that my work is not in a very small subcategory and because of. And I don't like to claim why it's not and why it is. For me, the war in Iraq was very transformative. It's being stuck in a place and not being able, my body, not to be able to leave. I was trapped. Moving from country to country was the idea of being a refugee and transnational issues and being displaced and not always being an outsider. And then living the many years as an illegal in America because I had no homeland to return to, or that I could return to, was this idea of disappearance and absence and hiding and understanding what people who live and have had to leave their region. So those are the political realities that made up of who I am, that walked into my work, and that allowed me to have empathetic understanding of many different issues as they move through in life. The refugee that might be political due to civil war, or war with another country, or because of oil, is the eco-refugees of the future and of now. And every single one of those ideas can be understood in time. So art is social practice, it is political, and at the same time it's personal, and that's why, for me.
Would you like to add?
Yes, I'll speak about myself. For myself, yes and no. Art can be a social practice and at the same time can be sheerly aesthetic. As long as there is an exploratory process of some sort to something. Every artist, the idea is art is really democratic, and it's a platform, it's a plateau that allows all practices of any sort, from painting flowers to doing very sophisticated conceptual work. The idea is, as long as there is a project and there is an obsession, yes, I mean, like every artist can work. Since 1959, the word contemporary art means art engaged with society. This is simply the academic definition of what the word contemporary art means. Contemporary means now and the social. This is the etymology of things. As an artist, I either follow the intellectual process, or like myself, honestly, when I work in my studio, I just have things in my head that need to come out either on canvas or either on narrative when I write a video or something. Every artist has a dimension. a dimension of voice or a dimension of practice. If you play in that dimension, the world becomes engaging. You get outside, it's not a comfort zone. It's what you can do. It's like the vocals when you sing. You play there, it becomes engaging. Whatever the content is, it becomes engaging. You play outside that, well, God or whoever is up there, he's definitely on sabbatical, at least in the Middle East for a while. He gave every single talent its own dimension, and we're all different. We all have our fingerprints. We can be engaged subconsciously or consciously.
So
you've been preparing for the next question and not listening to me.
I mean, no. I was going to say that's such a beautiful imagery. I like that. So that's such a beautiful imagery. The artist in the studio, the artist in his own space. So do you feel that as an artist you're always in exile? Do you feel there is something? Well, but Sam also mentioned the sense of exile. But is an artist always alienated, always separated, always at some point away from that? Who would like to start this conversation?
Well, I guess I have a hard time. I will say for me, yes, and I think that there is. I don't know if artists can do much else but be artists, you know, and so they see the world in this. I don't know though, because I'm not a non-artist, so maybe everybody feels exiled, and it's an existential thing and the globalization and social media. This just adds to these things, right? And why we romanticize the past in a simpler life. I even asked you this question yesterday when you were describing the orange blossoms, you know, and. You know, and today I just want a window that opens in this hotel. I live in a hotel. I have a family and children and a studio and a home, and I'm always dreaming of going to the Middle East, and I'm there, I'm like, I just want to go back home to America, and, you know, and then when I'm home, I'm bored and I'm itching to leave, and that all enters the work, and I'm answering very, very practically, but yeah, I think artists are always on the first of the line to whatever comes out, to be cynical, critical, think of it, and at the same time, to really just enjoy something very simple and see the sublime beauty in something. So, I don't know, hard to answer.
I mean, you use the word exile, but for me, there is a political connotation to the use of the word, and it cannot be true for every artist in the world. To say that every artist is in exile or it's a state of exile. Maybe in my case, yes, for many years I spoke about exile because by default, I lived in a horrible city, you know, and I forced myself to live in exile in my city of birth, Jerusalem. But then I realized I was not in exile. It's actually Jerusalem itself as a city, it is in exile, and everyone living in it, including Jews, are in exile. So everyone lived in no man's land. But to speak about artists specifically, I think every artist needs to feel alienation, needs to be out of the circle. You cannot be in the circle and think about life because you are questioning what life is about. You're questioning your surroundings. And by default, you distance yourself from the society, from religion, from politics, from many things, and you create your own voice. Now, sometimes it takes many, many years until we understand the artist's voice. I think it's usually 50 to 100 years, until you get what the artist wants to say. Unless you're a really great artist and you get it early on. But that's the beauty of it. That's why you find, like Gerhard Richter, for example, when you hear him speak today, you get the philosophy of life. And you enjoy every word he says because it's based on many years of investigation of the self, of the world, of imagination, of image. And that's what makes his art very beautiful.
And if you listen to them in Hearst, then you know that...
You want to kill yourself.
Then you know that the world is on Ellis.
Do you want to add to this? Or?
Maybe just to say that in Saudi you had this strange phenomenon of artists carrying on with their vocation as a doctor or a soldier, as an engineer, some of the artists, when I met them, a lot of them, and doing art kind of in secret or as a hobby, and their careers kind of took off, but they were terrified to leave their jobs because it's not a thing to be an artist in Saudi Arabia. It's not a thing that your parents will understand. It's not a thing that society thinks is that that kind of high status. And I think that was an interesting thing because, yes, definitely they were in exile because they were kind of hiding it and it was psychologically in exile. But actually it was a really interesting experiment because what came out of it was that they were actually in the society every day working jobs, and that became a source for their art. So I was used to, like, you go to art college, you separate yourself from society, you go to the pub with the artists, you look at the world, you talk about art with your friends, and actually that's why is that more valid than being a doctor, an engineer, and coming back and drawing from that experience into your life? And I thought that was a really interesting way, and it inspired me because, to be honest, I was bored of sitting with other artists in the pub and talking about, whether it's a painting about a painting about a painting, and some French philosopher from, 1960 who I don't understand, and everybody using that same language. So that was an interesting experiment and something that I think should give people, any people, that idea that creativity is it's an instinct, and it doesn't have to be defined by being an artist. It's defined actually by what you do with that feeling.
So I guess we come to an end to our discussion. Does anybody have any questions that they think should be shared publicly? Or we could stop here and let the artists mingle with you, and go ahead, Karin. Can you give Karin the...
So I have just a comment to make, 2 points, yeah? The one was about the label, the other is when you asked for if there is a change now in the Arab world and so on. First of all, I want to add 1 point regarding the label, okay? When you are an institution or a museum, why are you doing the exhibition? For whom are you doing the exhibition? Right? For the insiders, or for giving more insights into special things about a special art movement, about a special region, or not about the world? This is a question. In my eyes, I think that it is quite a duty of a museum or a cultural institution to bring in touch with something what is for the people not familiar, that they have the chance to get to know about something what they do not know very well, and especially, like, I come back always to the same story that myself made a research about, that there was no knowledge about art from the Arab world, that I had looked into it. I make a real serious academic research, and then you understand that you have to do something about it. So Arab does not mean labeling at all, first of all. Then the second thing, is there a change or so? I think it is a matter of the right time to, something is sometimes not ripe, I don't know, at a certain moment, because like Stephen is much younger than I am, so I have been in all these countries long. No, you don't think? I have been in all these countries long before I think he was still a kid in school or something. I have been already traveling through these countries and have already seen, but there was art, in Iran, in Morocco, in the Middle East and so on. There was artists I already met, but no one had here any kind of an interest to show them. There was no way. A second approach was then in the 1990s, and even then, after the research, even then, there was still not a museum or a gallery to be convinced to show art from this part. Even you show them images, somehow they were not believing in it. So the right moment, let's say, it's very cynical in a way. It was after 9/11 that people all of a sudden had an interest in this part. So, and I think since then, since the 2000, the years of the 2001 to 2000 now, then it start really to change. And in this time period, apart from that, we got the internet, what you mentioned also, what was a very important thing. Apart from that, also the term globalization got more and more into the consciousness of the people. So we now have a different platform, totally different platform. And then we should not stop too much about the labeling. I mean, good, you can correct the term, you can say, no, more precise is art from Arab countries or from Egypt or from Lebanon. But the situation was that first of all, you have to name it Arab to bring people in touch. That's it.
Thank you, Karin. Now, part of being in a Biennial is learning, and I have to say I also learned in being in this Biennial. Last time I heard you speak in a debate, and you said something that opened my eyes, and I'm going to write it in one of my future essays, because it convinced me. You said it's information, and we need this information just to make sense as viewers, as readers, to make sense of what we are looking at. So we should see it as information when we have an exhibition like Art from the Arab World, and not to go beyond that. It's just to understand what we are looking at, where it's coming from. If we don't put art from the Arab world, people might think it's art from Brazil, I don't know, from Japan, so what we are looking at. So I think it's spot on to say it's for information. It's a nice way to put it. So.
Yeah.
Well, we'll have a question from there. Yeah.
Well, talking about labeling, I just feel like I'm not an artist, first of all, but I feel like events in someone's life influence their creativity and their artwork. But these kind of events also create an imagination that can lead them into more like liberal views. And talking about art flourishing in countries like Saudi Arabia, you know, today, I was thinking, like, this is a very conservative society. And how is art actually flourishing in a country like Saudi Arabia or places like that when it can lead to liberalism? That's my question.
Give it to the Norwegian, not Saudi, but talking for Saudi. You know, there's something really powerful about the idea that the artists are kind of imagining something that's not there. If you go into Saudi now, like Fred and Wendy went, it's a tough place for an artist. It's a tough, you look around and it's tough. It's like, wow, what happened to creativity and cinemas and music? And because it's a tough place, a concrete jungle, and it seems really harsh. And I think that there's that thing that, you know, artists are, they're great at imagining this thing, imagining solutions. And I'm a big believer in artists as kind of this idea of artists as explorers. You know, that's why I went to Saudi. I was able, as a British guy, to use my creativity to wangle through, you know, diplomatic and borders, and, you know, I'd find a way because I'm creative, and also I've got nothing to lose. I've got no career kind of planned out in medicine or anything. But it's interesting because I think that is a very valuable part of society in Saudi Arabia, which is struggling to find a way forward with huge forces of, you know, it's not their fault that they found oil. It was the Texans that went there and saw the hump in the thing and said there's oil there, and enormous wealth comes out, and then, you know, you have a rural population that gets urbanized, and then suddenly everything's built up because they've been told that they need to develop, and they've built 4 new cities out of the desert that no one's moving to, and suddenly, oh my God, like, and then artists come in, and poets and writers, and they can imagine something. So I think you're absolutely right. It's this power of imagination. And the Saudi artists, it's still very tiny. Don't get it wrong. There's not thousands of artists going around. It's nothing like Iran or Iraq, where they've had thousands of years of cultivating that kind of culture. It is very underground, but it is real soft power because the imagining that they're doing is rising up from tiny little studios and ideas into front pages of newspapers, conversations between governors of cities. I know for a fact that there's 2 governors of major cities in Saudi who will pick up the phone and ask a Saudi artist on policy issues because they trust them, on issues of development, on issues of gender, on issues of some issues around bureaucracy. That's amazing. And that's because they've imagined a solution outside of the system, which is often a kind of semi-corrupt, you know, let's face it, like a semi-corrupt system where everyone's in someone else's traffic of power. So you're absolutely right. This idea of imagination is to be valued very, very much in a situation like that.
Go ahead. Okay.
Thank you very much for all the panels. It's been very, very refreshing to hear all the views. If imagination is an intuitive resource that we don't have to pay any money to use, unlike the natural resources like oil and things like that, and we hear in all the propaganda about big oil. My question is, what sustains art? Is it the commoditization of it? Is it a commodity that's being put into the open market? And if it is, who are the gatekeepers of this commodity, of art being a commodity, right? And where, if it's been used as a universal language, who's directing that conversation? Is it the artist or the institutions?
Well, who would like to answer?
I can answer. I had this debate in Germany last 6 months ago, and it shocked me. According to my understanding, it starts with the artist at the center. Then, after the artist, you have the gallery. After the gallery, you have the institution. After the institution, you have the museum. Then you have the auction house, you have the art fair, and the circle keeps growing and growing. At its center is the artist. Now, without the artist, without the art, there cannot be a gallery, right? Because there is nothing to deal with. There cannot be a museum because there is no art, etc. Now, a German told me, but it's the other way around. I said, what do you mean? He said, you don't think so because there's a museum, there is art? I said, no, I don't think so. He said, how don't you see it this way? It's because of the museum there are artists in this world. I said, how do you even perceive it like this? So I think, to answer your question, it's the artist that sustains the whole ecosphere? Eco? Hello? Yeah, the whole ecosphere of the system. Now, unfortunately, I go back to the curse of being an artist that we need the money to continue doing what we're doing. Because when we are very young, we're very passionate, we don't give a damn about creating art. We create it without being remunerated or getting any money. But then you hit 25, 28, 30, you want to get married, you have a child, 50, even 50, and then you want to have bread on your table. How you want to bring bread on your table? So you are confronted, either you work another job, you become a waiter, or you teach, or you do many other jobs, but this compromises your artistic journey, because I see artists on a mission to try to tell us something about the world. So I try at least not to get contaminated by the process. I want to sell my art, but I have to keep my dignity, and this is not something easy to do. And that's why I'm writing a book called The Artist's Curse, where I'm tackling these issues and how to navigate between all these scenarios and to be able to create art that's not contaminated.
So we know that Steve would like to be in the pub with his friends talking about arts, while Steven does not want to be in the pub and he wants to be a waiter creating art. Okay.
Well, thank you for that question, because it's really, this is a type of question that actually can have from all, like 4 of us, 4 totally different views. I would like to quote a guy called Joseph Beuys. Joseph Beuys, for artists, he is one of the gods of the 20th century, if I can say so, because he's much above any guru. So he's actually extremely influential, German. During World War II, he was actually a pilot, and a German pilot, and he got like, when he was bombarding England, they hit his plane, so he suffered like 2 years in incarceration. And when he came back, he studied. He went to the Dusseldorf Academy. And the guy is so influential to every single contemporary artist today. I quote him. He said that my best artwork is being a teacher. Okay, so this is to answer you.
Thank you.
No, serious. My best artwork is being a teacher, because, you know, like I personally, when I mentor my younger artists, I always tell them one phrase: your strength is by who is around you. Because, you know, if you get Maradona and makes him play in a 3rd division club, it's not the 3rd division club that will go upwards. It's actually Maradona who will get fat and sleep. you know. So basically, it's who you surround yourself with. Actually, teaching, you're surrounded by talented people. So there is no problem in teaching. But to answer your question, I actually summarize it into like a square or rectangle. No, not a circle, a square or a rectangle. Please quote me, not him. So, so on one angle, you have the artist who actually wants to do whatever they want. On the other side, there is the gallery who actually wants to sell, which is totally legitimate, right? Then you have the art, how do you call it, art critic. Art critic, they are not fashionable now. I mean, they are almost dead or dying for the past 30 years. No, art critic, not curator. Curator is the fourth. Okay, the art critic, always, what they need is they need an artwork they can understand so that they relate it to any reference in art history so that they can write the text. But the curator, who are actually a very strong denominator now, what the curator looks for, and this makes a difference to every single artist alive today, who are actually artists who move from the periphery to the center, is only one thing. The curator is looking for the artist who is stretching the boundaries of the medium. Like it's the content, but not only the content, how you make it, how to stretch the boundary of the medium, or the boundary of painting, photography, or whatever. But end of the day, eventually, you as an artist up there, or I as an artist up there, I develop my own formula, and that's what I'm mentoring my younger artists. Never cheat yourself. Like you do whatever you have to do, but always I develop 3 other statements, written statements. A statement goes to the gallery. Another statement, which is a little bit elaborated, goes to the journalist or critic, because they like people to do their homework. And then a third statement that goes to the curator. It's actually doing one single work, but just knowing, developing yourself in your studio, the language of how to pass this work to 3 types of audiences who are crucial in your career. That's actually, it's not a question of commodity. It is a commodity. It's a cultural commodity. It's a cultural accessory, by all means, but it's indispensable to some people more than other people. I, as an artist, it's indispensable for me. To collectors, it's indispensable. Museums, it's indispensable. So there is a strata. There is supply and demand. Basic laws of economics. Supply and demand, right? So eventually, never cheat yourself is the key. Do the work is the key. Of course, you have to have the artwork, but you have to develop 3 types of different statements of how to describe this work to 3 different strata of people. By the way, you can also develop a 4th text for the simple audience, a 5th to school students, etc. It's all up to you. Actually, part of I work 12 hours. Part of that is actually developing the text around it.
Can I say something to you?
Of course. Go ahead. You're asking my permission?
I'm asking his, not yours. I just wanted to add.
No.
Okay. I think that in the contemporary world that we're living in, there is a lot of accessibility for most of the planet to experience art. Maybe not having the art as ownership in their homes to be part of a collection or on their walls or to say they own something, but there is the internet, and I know there's lots of places where internet distribution isn't as strong as it is in the West, for example, but there are museums, there are books, and there's a lot of access. And I don't think that teaching is, I mean, I'm not saying in education it's a better system because to attend a university is a lot of money, and in fact, a lot of the places that we're speaking about and where we're from, a lot of them, they're not universities there, or they've been disseminated, or they're under threat, or they're still just growing. So there's still a lot of the actuality of commodification with art and art learning and teaching and studying is still a problem, but it's better than I think ever has been. And I have to say just one point. I know it's a kind of a silly story, but when it comes to the idea of the labeling and information that Stephen spoke that from Karin here, about the idea of it being information and not a label. I'm married to an African American, and we have many progressive friends in Tucson, Arizona, where we reside. And one time my husband was out biking in the mountains, as he loves to do, with a couple of my friends, and I'll just say they're white because I have no problem saying the label of white. And they were biking with him, and they lost him on the trail, and it's quite dangerous in the mountains. And they were backtracking, asking everybody they could find on the trail if they'd seen my husband. They described him in every way you could possibly describe him. 6 feet tall, has glasses, rides a red bike, wears an orange shirt. And they just couldn't get themselves as progressives and that wanted to be PC, couldn't get themselves to say he's black. And finally they said he's black, and they found him in a minute, after hours. So it is information after all.
I totally disagree, no offense, with Steve, because I think that actually your point's really important, that actually art is not sustainable. Artists do not survive without an ecosystem, and artists are not necessarily in the center. And what I mean is, when I grew up, I had art in choices of education from when I was 12. I could choose art, choose photography, had a wonderful teacher. I was very spoiled. When I went to Saudi Arabia and I saw that the young boys and girls didn't have that choice. It's not about art, it's about the capacity to develop a talent that you have or an instinct that you have to be creative. And I saw very clearly that was cut and cut and cut and cut. And that was reflected in the way that the society was. And I think that is very important to understand, that no one's an artist. You're a potential artist. You're a potential photographer. You're a potential things. I think there are many societies in the Middle East and in the world and all around the world where actually creativity is cut for various reasons, or not the opportunity. And I think the market, which often gets I give it a hard time because it's too dominant in Dubai. Also, that is a very important part of the ecosystem. It's a very important part of how the Saudi art scene is developing, and how an artist could sell a work and then they'd come back and they'd buy something more for their studio, etc. I take somewhere like, I don't know what's happening in Iraq at the moment, but it's shocking. Iraq and Yemen, you have these blind spots. Everyone talks about Dubai. What is happening in Iraq? What is happening to the artists where it used to be a center? What is happening in Sana'a, which is a center? But isn't part of the market, by the way. It's not going there. It's too dangerous to go there. I went to Yemen 6 times. I can't go there anymore, and I'd love to go. Edge of Arabia was originally a Yemeni exhibition, by the way, and it didn't go anywhere because there wasn't any funding, and I'll be honest and say that. So it's the ecosystem that is important. It's important that one part of the ecosystem doesn't get too dominant like it is in Dubai, because I think Dubai is a killer of creativity in some ways, because it's, too materialistic. But then you look at Baghdad or Sana'a, well, they need a better market there, and people going in and buying some pictures. Yeah, well, that's what the Americans keep saying with all these security firms. Yeah, it's true, but watch out what you say, because.
That is going back and part of the repopulation of repopulating and teaching in Iraq, in Baghdad. So I'm very clear of what I'm saying, that when we go there, we're still subjected to going to certain places because we cannot penetrate any further because of security issues. Even if you're willing, as I was, to put my life in danger, you can't penetrate to a certain point.
So I will just give Steve the final word.
30 seconds.
30 seconds, and then we'll end this, and we will mingle, and you will have a chance.
After Steve,
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't want to give the impression that I am self-centered, being in the center, okay? No, I'm not. I'm a firm believer of synergy. I think artists and galleries and museums and everyone should work together hand in hand to move forward, period.
So I would like to thank all of the artists. I would like to thank you. I would like to thank Wendy and Fred for bringing them here and giving us this great opportunity to meet with them. And Rudaina would like to announce something just before we close. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I just want to remind you, tomorrow there is a forum called Arabophobia that Fotofest has put together, and it is going to be a scholar, a poet, and a visual artist responding to this recent phenomenon, and the visual artist is Khalid Hafiz. I also would like to remind you of our second event celebrating the Arab National Month, and that is an exhibit at Be Human Gallery. It's an ACC exhibit, and it is this Thursday at 7:30. We will not acknowledge the presence of the owner of Be Human. Thank you for joining us today, and I want to say that it is an exhibit that is curated by Hadia Maulawi, and she is with us tonight. Thank you, Hadia. Tomorrow's forum is at Rice University, and it is at 6 o'clock p.m.
Also, sorry, on your way out also, we have cards for the Arab Heritage Month that has all the events throughout the month. And we do have also, I'm sorry. Thank you so much. We do have Fotofest calendar of events. And Zoe has the Fotofest book for the contemporary Arab art. It's only, I think, $60. And you get your chance. We have markers, so the artist can sign it. And you get a signed copy. And we also have the curator of Fotofest with us tonight, so she can sign it as well. All right. Thank you.